Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carrie Ryan. I'm the lead curator for learning and interpretation at M+, and I'm really excited to welcome you to our first public program supporting Guo Pei Fashioning Imagination. The exhibition opened today, so I really hope all of you have had a chance to see the exhibition or will take some time to visit after this talk. And I do want to say a grand thank you to HSBC who supported the exhibition. Without their support, we wouldn't be able to do all of this for you, so we thank them very much, as well as all of our patrons and members who also enable us to deliver fantastic public programs throughout the year. So I just want to make sure that everyone has turned off their mobile phones and make sure they're set to silent. We will be conducting this program in Putonghua and English, so do make sure you have an SI device so you can hear the conversation in either Cantonese English or Putonghua yourselves. So just make sure you've got the device that you need and put it onto the correct channel. We will open up for Q&A at the end if there is time, so you can scan the QR code that's on this screen and you can submit your questions at any point during the conversation. And should we have time at the end, we will make sure that we ask some of the questions. So today's talk will feature a conversation between our curator of fashioning imagination, Iko Yokoyama, and Guo Pei herself. To host and facilitate this conversation is Desiree Au. And we are grateful for Desiree for being here and hosting this conversation. I'll just tell you a little bit about her. Desiree Au is the founding publisher of Vogue Hong Kong. A media veteran, she has held senior editorial positions at the South China Morning Post, the Hong Kong Standard, and founded Time Out Hong Kong. She has contributed articles to international editions of the New York Times as well. She's an honorary trustee of the Women's Foundation, a founding patron of M+, a board director of the Society of Publishers in Asia, and a trustee of Design Trust. Her passion and interest in fashion make her a perfect person to host this conversation today. So please welcome her and the speakers to the stage. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. I'm Desiree, and I just want to say a big thank you for every one of you who made it out here despite the unstable weather. We are in for a real treat because for those of you who haven't seen the exhibition, this is really the culmination of one of China's foremost haute couture designer. And what I really find very special about Guo Pei Laoshi, who I'm going to introduce you in a bit, is the way that she's very, very much willing to share. She has done no less than 20 interviews for this very short visit that she made to Hong Kong. And today, she's going to be talking about her journey, her pieces, and of course, her fashion and her inspiration. So we have today also with us Iko Yokoyama, who is the curator of this very, very special show. And I would like to start by inviting everybody to give a warm Hong Kong welcome to our speakers today. So first things first, I'm going to start with a little bit of a background. So Guo Pei Laoshi is China's leading couture artist, and she combines Chinese cultural heritage with international elements and artistic expression. Her astonishing runway collections have impressed fashion and art audience alike for almost 30 years. Presenting this first major exhibition of Guo's work produced in China, M+ is showcasing her key collections, including her early designs, which highlights her unique career connecting China and the rest of the world and the cultural symbols created through her sophisticated and visually dazzling practice. Working with the couturier and her studio, the exhibition presents a selection of garments shown to audiences in the region for the very first time and creating a layered dialogue with the M+ collection around visual imagination and workmanship. The exhibition is Guo Pei's unique artistic style that resonates with the imperial Chinese dress etiquette, European royal fashion, architecture, and the botanical world. So I'm super excited. And with us today is Iko Yokoyama, who is the lead curator of design and architecture at M+. Before joining M+, she served as a head of exhibition at the Konstfack University College of Arts, Crafts and Design in Stockholm. In parallel, she's also an independent curator and writer and has worked on international exhibitions and projects across Europe, South Africa, and Japan. I am so pleased to have Iko join us, as well as Guo Pei. And without further delay, I'm going to start going right into the question, because I know you're all very, very excited to hear about how this exhibition came together. So my first question is for Iko. So Iko, this is such an amazing showcase of garments that are at once dramatic and feminine and personal. Tell me about how you conceptualized this exhibition and worked on the design, and what kind of story do you want to tell for Guo Pei 老师?
Thank you for this question. Good afternoon, everybody. So I really, so this as you see here. So once I was assigned to, looking at who is an important figure from this part of the world, to really doing a very distinct original creation, but also as the perspective visual culture. So really who go beyond just the different realms. So we are very interested in the figures. It's not like just the art or design or architecture or fashion. So she is a kind of transcending the disciplines, and then also the way, also this culture linkages. So beginning, I started looking at her amazing, the old collections. It's so different, but it's so many garments I have to look through. So I felt a bit like this. So I was assigned a botanist at the garden. So I'm kind of also taxonomizing the indexing, the different, almost as if it's pieces of her garments. Then the next slide. So this is a kind of the keywords. So the ones I'm started kind of thinking about her creation. So imagination is all through. And then also very quickly I realized it's not the retrospective or the chronological show I want to make. Because I start to see those keywords, as you see, like a nature, personal, fantasy, cultural heritage. Time is also, through her craftsmanship and accumulation. So I start to see the kind of the linked keywords. That was kind of naturally informed these 5 chapters. It's almost like, so again, if you're making the botanical garden, so this is the garden of the tulip, this is the garden of sakura, and so forth. But again, this is a very connecting dot that was the imagination behind. So, and then, okay, so then the exhibition also designed as if you walk around the garden. So these garments, they're one of the showpiece you see very in the beginning of the show. So the architect designer, Belquist Josefsai. So we went to New Zealand to see the Madame Gaux's garments, and this garment really inspired us physical form of the exhibition. So there's a very like a stylized the Chinese garden with the undulating paths, 3-dimensional flowers, and the Chinese pavilions. And then also, for example, so then from the beginning, we wanted to make a dialogue with Empress collection. So here you see Yung Ho Chan's very beautiful silver plates, the silver plated plates, which is the dried lotus leaf. So dehydrated lotus leaf, how it's forming. So this exhibition was designed almost like the landscape, which is almost topographic map, and then also sometimes a frozen lake and so forth. That was the beginning, forming the show.
Before we go to Ms. Guo Pei with more questions, I just want to follow up with one more question for Iko. How many months did this take? And what were some of the most difficult challenges that you faced in terms of selecting the right pieces for this? But I just want to know, how many months was this from beginning to now?
So it took a little bit more than 1 year, but that's, I must say, was very quick. I wish I had a little bit more time, because it's Madame Gaux's garment is also very popular from other museums. So I have to kind of put my concept very quickly to, I want to have this garment, and so forth. But luckily, because we loaned from Madame Gaux, and she supported our curatorial idea very early on. So we presented first time this juxtaposition of artworks. It was a little bit nervous because it's the first time. we show her garment together with contemporary art design collections, because the previous shows has been often juxtaposed with pre-modern antiques. So we were a little bit like if she likes it or not, and then immediately she really said yes, and she really loved it. That really encouraged us to work on that.
Amazing. I'll be asking the question in English, and Guo Pei 老师 will be hearing in the SI in Putonghua. So my first question, and this is a two-part question. So the journey of your career is here on display for everybody to see, and there must be some very significant pieces that represent the special milestone. Now, before we actually go to the magnificent gold, which is the famous dress worn by Rihanna, I want to ask Guo Pei 老师 about some of the more significant pieces that she is seeing and she would like to recommend for the audience today.
其实我觉得，我其实是一个特别爱思考的设计师，我在每做一件作品或一个系列的时候，都是我的一次成长，因为我觉得作品和我的做的这个商品不一样，那所以我觉得，如果你现在说再选择一个里程碑式的作品，我想可能还有就是蕾哈娜的衣服，因为这件作品它让我一下子站到了世界的面前，可以说当蕾哈娜穿上这件衣服出现在麦嘎拉红毯上的那一瞬间，世界就知道了一个中国设计师。其实有时候他有意思的就是他不是你，可能我并不知道他的结果，甚至蕾哈娜在借这件衣服的时候，我根本都不知道谁是蕾哈娜。那作品是2010年，是我的1002夜系列之一，但是没想到几年后，他以另外一种方式，然后站在一个很高的一个舞台上，又一次绽放。
Now, the Met Gala is also obviously known as the definitive fashion moment. When you were designing this dress, did you knew particularly that she would be walking the red carpet? And what was the imagination before she got on the red carpet? You were saying to me before the talk started that, she was, the fitting had a bit of problem because she was shaking, she was wearing very high heels. So at that moment, as a designer, it could go many ways. Tell me about the feeling that you had before this was debuted to the world.
对，其实大家就都非常的好奇，说，怎么样蕾哈娜怎么就选择了这件衣服，或者是你怎么样找到蕾哈娜？但我其实是，我是一个有一点两耳不闻窗外事的设计师，我专注在自己的作品表达中，自己的设计中，很多东西我都不了解。我记得当时收到蕾哈娜的邮件，然后我先生对我说，蕾哈娜要借你的作品，想在这个纽约这个我们当时镜花水月的展览，因为当时有我的大金。然后我说蕾哈娜是谁？他说是个歌手。我说no， 歌手不能穿不了，他这个衣服是不能唱歌穿的。他说好像不是唱歌穿。然后那我说这衣服太沉了，太重了。然后他说但是我们要去纽约因为你的展览还在那里，我们还要去也参加这个活动，所以说他说咱们还是带过去吧，这样不好意思，你这多不好意思见面以后。然后我就装行李的时候，我记得特别清楚，一边装行李我一边摇一下重量25公斤，所以我知道它是25公斤。然后我在拉链的时候，我在想，我怎么装去，怎么带回来？这个衣服，我想它太难驾驭了。它真的是，因为它在2010年，其实当时是国家体育馆中国，它模特走出来的那一刻，我特别记得那个场景，因为它太大了，鞋又很高，然后那个模特我就站在我的眼前，我在台口，他就腿就抖得要命，然后他就说我走不了，我走不了。我说你已经站在这里了。我说没关系，你看舞台就这么长，然后这个模特几乎是拖着这件衣服走出去的。但是你知道，对于一个设计师而言，我这个衣服完成的过程中付出了2年半，但是其实 T 台上这个时间，他走的台的一半，他已经就走不动了，然后我们就把灯拉下来，然后就扶他下台，然后我心里就特别大的遗憾，我就想，这个 这个衣服2年多的努力，但并没有在台上那一刻展现的极其的完美。但是你知道命运，我有时候相信这个冥冥之间的这个命运。然后居然他过了几年，就在2015年的时候，蕾哈娜借这件衣服的时候，其实我并不知道她的目的。我都是担心，刚才你说我担心，我太担心了。你知道我在这个红毯上，大家看到这个图片哈，我是唯一一个顺着这红毯的边缘往外走的，就是我是想，因为那天我那个嗓子不能讲话，压力啊，倒时差，反正就是我要生病了，然后我就想快快的离开红毯。当我往外走的时候，我的余光就看到蕾哈娜在那里整理这件衣服，在后台，然后我就想，千万别看到我，千万别看到我，因为他肯定心里在说这什么衣服这么重，然后我就真的很担心他走出去的时候，他根本走不动。然后但是我快走出去，走到进口的那边出去的时候，我就听到我的背后哇的声音。当时现场你真的难以想象那个欢呼的声音，然后我当时很惊讶，我说天哪，成功了！我其实就是这样，有时候我觉得。我们中国常说就是，你越求而不得是一种最大的苦，但是我没有求，我不知道它的结果，我全是担心，但是我没想到它却是这样的一个好的结果。我还记得当天从酒店出来的时候，服务员帮我开门，我就像一个游客一样的，但我回去的时候，仅仅时隔没有多久，然后那个酒店的门童就说：“啊，蕾哈娜郭培 designer。”哇，他就认识我了，我就想，天哪，真的是没有想到，一瞬间全世界所有的媒体的报道，然后大家看到了，说这件作品是一位中国设计师。
I think also the Met Gala is obviously, a place where everybody is going to show off their looks. And I think this dress is the dress that actually sent off 1,000 memes. There were pizza dresses. There were so many things. And I think this is a way that fashion can actually get into the household. I mean, everybody knows Rihanna. And the fact that Rihanna chose to wear Guo Pei is something that is quite extraordinary because this is something that you did not look for. Now, besides this dress, some of the dresses that are in the exhibition are extremely delicate, they are extremely visual, they are difficult, they are challenging. Are there any other pieces that I should be recommending to the audience besides this one to see in your show?
这个整个展览差不多是我近20年的一个作品的选择。其实我觉得每件作品我都想推荐给大家，因为每件作品背后其实都有那个时候我的想法，我内心的渴望的分享。但是我想可能如果选择一个系列的话，我就想选择这个传说系列，因为整个传说系列呢，我并不是为 T 台做的。我觉得在我毕业之后成为一名设计师，其实我曾经在年轻的时候给自己设计了3个阶段。我认为第一个阶段就是第一个10年，我是在学习走向社会，那是1986年我毕业。其实86年到96年，我是一个全新的一个学习的机会。那个时候我什么都干，是一名成衣设计师。但第二个10年呢，从96年到06年，这是我一个实践的10年。在这个10年中，我成立了我自己的品牌玫瑰坊。那个时候我想要自由，我觉得在产品设计中呢，我的很多的想法是无法实现的，因为它必须为品牌赚钱，而我觉得我想做一条大裙子。所以这第二个10年呢，我想给自己自由，但是没想到公司成立之后，我突然间一下子，我从一个自由的一个设计师，然后我突然间当我发不出工资的那一刻，我一下子所有的想法都变了。我要赚钱，我要发工资，我要让我这个团队活下去。其实那个时候呢，我真的在这种实践中，我转变了很多。然后到04年、05年的时候，我的品牌稳定了，然后我又想起了那条大裙子。所以其实大家看到了有一条5万个小时做的大襟，可以想象那个是我那个时候20年的就这种一条大裙子，然后等了20年，足足等了20年。所以当我有了这个能力，我其实 哪怕不是5万个小时，50万个小时我都想付出，我就想做一条在我很小的时候心里非常期待的大的最美的世界最美的裙子。所以整个这个我人生的过程，第3个10年我才有了作品，所以大金呢是我的第3个10年作品的开始。但是我特别想跟大家分享的系列叫传说，这里面作品这个整个展览中一件红色的是他们当年是87岁在巴黎这个 T 台上穿的这件作品。你能想象87岁的老人然后居然能够穿上这件作品在这个 T 台上？其实这件红色是我为他而做的。红色呢，它代表着血液，代表着生命，代表着激情，代表着这种爱，代表着牺牲和奉献。我特别爱他们，我感动他。他78岁为我走过一件衣服，这个时候他是87岁。我看到他的一生，我特别感动，他把自己的全部奉献给他所爱的模特事业。所以我觉得在整个的这个传说系列中，他就是我的榜样，就是我向他学习。所以传说他是奉献给他们的，同时也是给我自己50岁的人生30年的事业的总结，所以它意义不同。我当时为了完成这个系列，整整用了将近3年的时间。然后可以说这个系列的从面料制作面料开始，然后所有的绣花一针一线到鞋子在头上，全部是我们的团队手工做的。我觉得那个是我最认真，就是表达极尽的一个系列。虽然在我们今天的展览上，它有这件红色的这个奉献就他们的这件衣服，同时还有件白色的那个像建筑像教堂一样，它叫大家起名叫白圣母，它其实就是我。你知道这件衣服整个我这个系列，我突然间明白了灵感从哪里来。我是一个设计师，我一直在创作，但是其实我常会被媒体问到说，那灵感从哪里来？我觉得灵感是生活中来呀，灵感是在你的这个对生活的爱等等等等，其实都不是。灵感它真的不是你生命中种下的那个种子，它慢慢的成长，它不是在你生命的之内成长出来的。那其实是什么？那是经验。就是如果说我生命中从一颗小种子慢慢成长为一棵大树，那成熟成长的是经验。所以我们说经验呢，一定要经过一个时间，经过生命中的历程。经验非常重要，经验就是我作为一名设计师，或者不管裁缝也好，做一件衣服的这种技艺，就像朗朗弹钢琴一样，它是有万次积累的过程。但是灵感它是从天而降的，所以我说的这个灵感，它真的是你的那个天真。所以人要保持天真，就人要像有天线一样的，你要能够接收这个宇宙或者这个所有外在的一切给予你的启发。就像可能我的这些作品在这个博物馆的空间中，也许很多人看到以后产生了灵感，因为它是从外而来的，就那一瞬间它贯穿了你的生命。我记得我当时在瑞士的这个教堂里面，这个是那个瑞士一个很小的城市，它叫圣加仑。这个教堂非常的小，外表就是一个白色的很普通的，就像这件衣服给我的，就像这个衣服当时是我对教堂的印象。当我走进去，我一个人站在教堂中间，站在那个穹顶下，我那一刻我觉得，如果这时候我的生命融化在这里头，它就叫一种幸福。所以其实那一刻我不知道用语言如何表达，反正在那里我很久很久我才走出来。然后从离开教堂，其实我一点不懂这个信仰，我不知道十字架代表什么，我不知道每尊神的名字，我来自于东方，它不是我的信仰，但它仍然感动了我。所以我从那个教堂走出来， 我不知道怎么样到机场，从机场到中国，其实路上我就设计了这个系列。那真的是一气呵成的，所以大家走进门可能看到那个墙上有3张Eco 选的图纸，然后我当时说，哎呦，怎么选的这么丑的我的手稿？其实我能画的，我的手稿我认真的画的漂亮的手稿多极了，我的大金画的可认真了，但是那不是我的手稿，那不是一个绘画的技巧，它就是我那一刻特别想马上记录下来，而想分享给任何人，就是我那个简直就是比我的语言的速度一样特别快的记录的。所以我觉得有的时候艺术家他的灵感真的是下载的，所以我们其实每一个人我们都有神性，我们都有人性和神性。神性就是你的想象力，神性就是你接收宇宙给你的一切，外在给你一切的那个能力。所以我们每个人就要保护好你的神性，让你一直保留着天真，然后有这种接收的能力。所以我觉得这个是我生命中很大的一种启发，就是让我在做整个系列中，其实我懂了什么叫奉献。我觉得艺术是我的奉献，所以我成为了世界上一个不卖自己作品的设计师。我不舍得，因为这不是我的商品，它不是我做出来赚钱的东西。其实它在任何一个博物馆里面，我相信它留给世界的不是今天人们衡量一个人的成功他会赚钱是否，衡量一个品牌的成功他赚了多少钱是否，而这一切不是衡量的唯一标准。其实影响力其实就是说艺术作品它是有光芒的，它在那里它能够释放出光芒，它的光芒照射到哪里，温暖到谁，启发到谁，这是它的最重要的一面。谢谢，我说的很长。谢谢。
The joy of spending time with Guo Pei Lao Shi is because she has such an innocent approach to things. She's such a learner, and she's always willing to share what she's learning. So with all of these exhibition pieces, I want to circle back first to Eco. The theme is fashioning imagination. Now, fashion is obviously meant to be worn and meant to be moved around. Tell me about your visualization process and how did you use your imagination to take this exhibition and make it take flight?
Thank you. You hear me? Yes. Yeah, exactly. So I was thinking how to introduce fashion, which is not go beyond the realm, the fashion. So again, from the beginning, as Madame Gu also said, I mentioned a little bit before about this dialogue of the work. So then it shouldn't be here. Sorry, can you go one back, please? Yes, thank you. So again, I found very many affinities and the similarities in her approach, and then also a way of appreciating craftsmanship. But it's a contemporary artist. They're living through the same time, responding to the same economy and the history and the society. So it is like it's a shared life. It's how it's inspiring. Exactly as Madame Gu says, she's got her own roots, but if she traveled to Europe and other places, then they take in and make it her own. So my imagination started almost like this botanical garden things I started. But for example, here, so Aisha Khalid is a Pakistani female artist. So she practiced and she mastered so-called miniature painting. So it's a traditional painting method. But then she was really modernizing and we're pushing a little bit boundary to using this technique to her own painting. But later, so Aisha studied in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, at the Lijks Academy. So people are saying, oh, Aisha, your painting's very traditional. But when she's back in Pakistan, people say, oh, Aisha, your painting's so radical. So I see the Guo Pei's embroidery is very much like that. Again, in China, people say, well, you're appropriating Chinese traditions and embroidery, reviving technique, but is this really Chinese embroidery? And then if she goes to abroad, wow, this is very like the Chinese embroidery. So it's again what is the common here. It's about their taking to their roots and then to master it, but then also make it their own narrative story. So it was a full of the storytelling aspect in Madame Guo's work, but it's also important is that this as I unpack her garment, inspired by very much this the strong women, female voice in her garment. So seemingly you will see very romantic, very elegant, sometimes very girly or fantasy look. You will see it. So this in the center is an amazing German childhood dream. That's her second earlier haute couture piece. And Madame Guo was in the sweet mood because she was carrying her second child, being, and then also you grew up as the only girl child in the family. So it looked like a very fairy tale. But this garment, very heavily silver, 3 decorative embroidery, almost like a panel, it's inspired by this Spanish bullfighter. So it's again, Spanish bullfighter is really the strong figure, but it's also to this elegance and this dignity. So it's coexistence of this strong female and then the femininity is in there. And then also, so then it goes my imagination go to this Liu Wei's amazing painting, so Little Match Girl. So this was the painting was inspired from the Andersen's, the saga fairy tale stories. But here, it's not about the poor little girl was frozen in the snow. So this story is about to carry your light through your life. So this is about the strong girl to go through their own journey. So I really saw little Guopei in there. So it's her consistency, not let go. Yeah.
Variants of her. Yeah. I think another fascinating part about this exhibition is that, I think Guopei Laoshi shared so much about her creative vision, about her drive, her inspiration, but the other half of the exhibition is really about the intricate, exquisite, and almost painfully carried out craftsmanship. I understand that Guopei Laoshi has one of the biggest ateliers in her studio, and that's not hard. That's not an easy task because she has to keep everybody employed. And like I said, she's not a commercial person. So tell me about your commitment to learning about the craft, and how does that symbolize, Chinese and Chinese culture, and bringing this forward to the world today.
确实，在我的展览上，可能大家最不容易忽略的细节就是我的那些手工艺刺绣。我在全世界设计师里面，可能我最出名的也是因为我的这个手工艺。但是在很早期的时候，也很多人说，郭培他这个就是因为他工艺太强了啊，所以他的设计其实，作为现代人，很多人觉得设计要简约化。但是我其实有不同的理解，就像我刚才说的，技艺它是一种表达的能力，就是想法我们每个人都不缺，甚至比我想法还多的人更多，但是他表达不出来。就比如说我太想告诉你们，我脑子里有很多的想法，但是我是个哑巴，所以我的想法是没有办法与世界交流的。那么如果我想讲一个故事，但是我的语言，就是通常一个作家他会觉得，哎呀，我心里想跟大家说的，其实远远我的文字是表达不出来的，我的文字简直太苍白了，所以呢，他就会找一些华丽的词汇来丰富他的文字，他目的是表达他内心的这个情感和故事。因此，文字你无论怎么样的丰富，你知道，所以今天我们有那么多词汇，那么多的词藻，它仅仅是为了表达你的思想，所以最后文字还是不够，永远不够，所以出现了诗歌，很多的散文诗也好，总之呢，他们都是超越文字的一种表达。所以我在我的内心深处，想用做衣服这件事讲清楚我内心的这种感动，那种可以奉献，甚至可以牺牲的那种灵感。我的记忆是太有限了，所以很多人特别关心，说郭培你的刺绣是哪里学的？很多年，20年前就有法国人说，郭培你这个绣花是哪里学的？我说我自己想的。他说这是法国的啊。我也许是因为在战争博物馆看到了拿破仑的那件衣服，我的想象。然后也有人说这是西班牙的， 就像刚才《童梦奇缘》那个系列，的确是我确实在西班牙斗牛士的衣服上受到了这个立体刺绣的启发，然后我用我的方法去实现它，因为我想用它表达勇气。我觉得女人她外表是柔弱的，但内心不能再柔弱。如果女人外表柔弱，内心柔弱的话，我们就得依靠，就得有人靠人，有什么靠什么，那我们就不能独立于社会。其实一个强大的一个生命，他外表柔弱，必须内心坚强。但男人外表坚强，像山一样，但他内心要柔软。这就是我们中国人的阴阳智慧，阴阳和合，这才是一个完美的一个合体。所以其实我在怀孕的时候，我在想，其实怀孕的女人看起来应该就是很最柔弱的时候啊，但是那个尤其你期待着那个新的生命的诞生，其实那时候的那个女人是非常可爱的。我自己觉得啊，就是那个有一种天真可爱。但是我的作品其实就我的内心。我当时看到那个斗牛士，我说为什么一个人站在牛面前，你要跟他决斗的时候，为什么穿那么漂亮？为什么斗牛士的衣服那么美？然后绣花为什么在他身上绣这么多那么美的花？而且我发现，只有斗牛士身上的那个刺绣手工是最立体的。哦，我突然间明白了，其实他并不是想给那牛看到我不怕你，是他外表，他告诉自己的内心，我是最强大的。所以他没有因此而变成一头比牛还大的那个人，他其实他内心的勇气，通过这一切的表达，就像一种能量一样的迸发出来，所以他能战胜那头牛。所以当那一刻我就想说，女人也应该是这样，女人外表应该是非常柔弱可爱的，但是内心要更强大。所以其实我的作品都是表达，但因此我不会这个西班牙的刺绣，我没有教过我，但是呢，我就努力的模仿学习，去甚至超越它。所以今天你看到的所有绣花，我说我没学过一天绣花，我没有老师，我的刺绣也不仅来自于中国，并非是苏绣，但是我走到全世界，在瑞士，我看到他们博物馆里放的那些过去的刺绣绣片的时候，我太惊讶了。你知道我趴在那里啊，我一遍一遍的看，我在想，天哪，怎么那么精美？我觉得我如何能超越它？我趴在法国的那些博物馆里看到那些刺绣的时候，我说天哪，我怎么样的做到跟它一样？所以其实我是被全世界这种文化艺术滋养的。所以我的作品中，它已经不再是中国，我的民族，我的国家。所以我觉得它是一个是我们的地球，我们的世界。所以很多人也关心我的作品中东西方文化怎么融合在一起的。都没有方法，就是爱。因为我的文化就像我的中国的文化，就像我的血液一样，像我的母语，它是我生命中不可分离出去的那部分，它就是我生命，它就是我的生命。但是你知道，改革开放当国门一打开，我第一次走到世界，太吸引我了。所有我们好奇的、吸引我们的，都是我们不曾了解的。所以西方的文化吸引着我，然后它自然而然走到我生命中，它是在我生命中合成的，就是它在我的生命里，在我的心里，它融合成了一个整体。当我想讲故事的时候，它就表现出来、表达出来。所以我觉得人类的记忆呢，看似今天我们人类因为对过去我们都失传了很多方法，就记忆说是方法技术，但是我觉得没有什么遗憾的，因为今天你不需要它，它就离开了你的生活。但是我们还有科技发展呢，我们还有宇宙飞船呢，我们又有未来的这个，所以我们所有人类的进步使得有些东西我们必须放弃它。它不适合今天的生活，但是如果有一天你需要它的时候，我们人其实可以创造一切，最重要的是我们的创造力。所以看到我的作品，你应该相信，我不可能有那么多的老师教我，可以说无师自通的。我在82年学服装设计，中国没有老师， 我没有一个老师教我刺绣，我没有在国外读一天学，我真的是82年到86年，我只有老师教我怎么画衣服，还有个裁缝教我们怎么样做衣服，真的没有今天的学生学得多，但是一切都发自于我内在的这种想表达以及我的创造力，但是受到全世界文化的滋养。谢谢。
So
谢谢。
very intense and personal sharing. Now, this brings us to our last question, and this is actually going to be a two-part question because this is a conversation between a curator and the artist as well. So, Iko, tell me what are the true values of this exhibition that you want people to take away? And then after that, I'm going to ask Guo Luoshi, as a Chinese fashion designer making Chinese fashion history, what do you think you have contributed to Chinese history? So let's start with Iko.
Thank you. So true value of this exhibition, almost as Guo Pei just said about this, the embroidery technology, maybe the many futures, the beyond all of us. So again, always how artists create, reflect their own time. They put their life in it. So this magnificent the gold, and then also, for example, here at Yoko Ono's Apple, you will see one of the largest garment and the smallest artwork in the exhibition. But here it's both about the life cycle and then also time, and then to how you've frozen the moment, but it's something for the future. So it's again, you said like maybe we don't the needs of things we don't know in the future, but again we exist. That's why also the museum work, we are the keeper of those memories of the creators from many generations. So but then if we in the future when they need it, we have it. But then otherwise, if we don't respect, if we especially the craftsmanship, it's very important to Guo Pei's creation. It's the craft is with innovation, so it's not the preservation. So preservation is just something you just repeating old things, but then it become, as a historian, if you read it, or is this from 2024 embroidery or 1800? But then Guo Pei's become definitely 2024, 21st century Chinese embroidery. It will distinctly really reflects that. So again, so that's the beauty of her garments. And then also, I wanted for the takeaways to slow you down. So the fashion has been consumed, the runway model will just walk in front of 20 seconds, that's it. You never had a chance to really actually see the detail. So this is also the way to slow down and appreciate the fashion, also in relationship our very high, fast-paced, consumption-based culture we are living in, to really look at imagine the times. You can imagine it's insane how long it will take. So, it will bring to you another imagination that will become very a lot of philosophical questions such as time and then also memories. So that's the kind of that I wanted to convey through this exhibition.
Extremely fascinating, and I think this brings us to our last question. And to finish off, Guo Pei Laoshi, what do you think you have contributed to the history of Chinese fashion and to China or Chinese civilization in general? It's a very heavy question, I know. It's not a Saturday afternoon question. I think it's like a Monday morning question.
对，我很幸福，因为我出生在中国一个非常特别的时期。我1967年，就是你知道，这个是中国其实一穷二白的时代，尤其那个时代就是这样的画面。所以我的妈妈呢，穿的衣服，我们家有一个那个。好像是爸爸亲自做了一个大衣柜，3开门的，放进了家里面所有人的衣服，就都在这一个柜子里头。因为现在人，我相信一个房间都放不下你的衣服，而当时一家人就是一个柜子，就都放进去了。所以从那个时代，我对衣服没有认识，因为一年在过年的时候才有新衣服，所以特别爱过年，因为穿新衣，所以过年穿新衣。我们真的那个时候是这样的。那新的衣服呢，就是所有的，就是你结婚就是穿新衣，然后你出门在外面做工作，不管你做什么，其实穿的都是一件衣服，然后旧的衣服就是在家穿，所以我们生活中几乎就是一样的衣服。 然后我82年学服装设计，我82年我说妈妈我想学服装设计，那时候我是15岁多一点，然后我妈妈说服装还需要设计，我说我对，然后我的邻居说那就是裁缝，我说不是，所以我是中国真正的第一代服装设计师，86年毕业，就是4年改革开放了。所以你看我们中国，就是我觉得我如果从82年算起，其实我是接触时尚是42年，但是这42年就是从零开始的。中国从没有服装设计，服装都不用设计，那时候我们所有人都是这样的。我妈妈的衣服领子就是这样，系上就是一个小翻领，打开就是一个翻领，所以就没有变化。然后我80年代毕业走向社会，改革开放，所有的一切都涌入到国内，但是我其实哪有今天的设计师的能力，在技艺上是我一边去做一边去学。我觉得一个人的智慧不是学出来的，智慧不是学出来，智慧是做出来的。当你做的过程中带着思考，你就慢慢生成了对生命的认知，也就有了思想智慧。所以到了90年代，我觉得中国其实时尚发展最重要的阶段是90年代到2000年，就是进入21世纪前那10年，蓬勃发展。大家可能看过一个电视剧，就叫《繁花》，就是那样的一个时代。其实我就在那个时代和时代同时成长。那个时候我的衣服服装设计只要是变化，大家就接受。所有的人在街上会看到你穿件漂亮的衣服，说哪里买的，然后你告诉他那里，然后他马上就去买。所以在街上经常会看到很多人穿一样的衣服。那时候就有流行色。86年我记得有一年街上流行红裙子，所有人都穿红色，还有黄裙子，所有人都穿黄裙子。所以这个就是那个时代走过来。但是今天我站在世界，我站在法国高定工会的这样的一个平台上，我其实为中国骄傲。真的，我们短短的30年、40年，我们真的不落后于任何一个国家。所以其实我今天我的作品能进入博物馆，能够超越高定的表达，我觉得这就是我们中国人。其实我不是说简简单单的我个人，其实我带着一个国家。就像大金出现在大都会博物馆的那一瞬间，纽约时报说这件作品让世界看到了中国时尚。在这之前，大家可能认为中国没有时尚，所以我觉得如果说我是中国的代表，我自己也觉得非常的骄傲因为我记得在国外有一次，中国媒体有国外的媒体，他们说郭培你代表，当时什么问题？他说郭培你代表中国吗？我说我不能够自己说自己代表，我觉得代表不是我自己想代表。这么伟大的一个民族一个国家，并非是某一个人，万一我做的不够好呢，我怎么能代表我的国家？但如果在你的眼里认为我代表了，那我非常非常的骄傲。所以其实我觉得在今天，包括您的问题说我代表了这个国家，那我其实站在这里是内心非常非常骄傲的，我觉得是我做到了。谢谢。
There you have it. An extraordinary woman on her extraordinary journey right here at M+. I want to thank all of you for your time today. We will have a couple of questions from the audience that were submitted a while ago, and I'm going to read this question. Okay, so here goes. This is to Guopei Laoshi. In some of your pieces, you blend both Chinese history with other cultural references. What kind of considerations do you have when you blend cultures? I think you answered a little bit of that with the Spanish bolero jacket, but here's something from the audience.
是的，关于文化融合，如果你从作品里面想去看文化在里面如何的融合体现的时候，你就会觉得它是用了方法。但是从我在创作的时候，其实我从来没有过它是来自于哪里， 它是什么国家，它又怎么样拿捏住这个度，我怎么样的我的文化用多少，别人的文化加入多少，其实这就是一个非常复杂的过程。但是我告诉你，最简单的就是用爱，你把你所有爱的元素接受它们，融合到你生命里。当你想表达一份情感，讲述一个故事，做一件衣服的时候，只要你用爱，无论这个爱它是在哪里滋养出来的，所以用爱的表达就是我融合所有元素的方法。所以今天我的作品里，我都说不清楚它是受了哪里的启发哪里的这个学习，但是我知道它已经都在我的生命中。我想分享，就是有一天我看到了一张图片，是人类发射了一个卫星，它每年就拍摄照片回来，但是他最后很多年后，他只拍了最后一张照片，在网上你可以看到。然后这张图片呢，你在众多的群星中根本看不出哪个是地球。如果它没有标记，画一个圆，你都不知道小的跟细胞一样的那个是地球。所以我觉得我们对生活看问题，其实是不断的有高度提升的。如果我们站在地上，地平线上，就太多的分别你和我。如果我们高一点，就是你们和我们；如果再高一点呢，就是我们和他们，我们地球和宇宙。再高呢，如果你站在宇宙的高度，站在那颗发射出去的卫星的高度，你回头看地球在哪里，它就是个细胞。这时候你还分文化东西吗？你还分人类动物吗？你还分植物吗？什么都没有。其实我们人类就是一个细胞，所以我们是一个整体，包括文化也是一个整体。在1000年前，我们的文化就在做着不断的融合。所以你看青花瓷，它并不是中国的，它是很多文化的融合，它又走到了世界。其实我们从来没有缺乏过文化的对话，所以我们人类根本就是融合在一起的。如果你今天你说这是西班牙的，那是中国的，那你就在分别它。其实我们是一家人哦，那你为什么非要把它拆分成东西，又把它拆分成你我呢？所以觉得宇宙世界其实不在外面，在你的心里，你应该有一个庞大的，就是你的内心世界你要用爱把这个世界装进去，倒装进去，把宇宙都装进去。这个时候，你所有的表达就是一个整体。
Very extraordinary answer.
谢谢这么好的问题。
I want to take a 10-second thank you to the simultaneous interpreter. I have never heard someone so eloquent and so succinct. So wherever you are in the control room, the audience also thanks you. The last question is for Eco. The exhibition is super beautiful. What was the hardest part to get right?
Well, it's a lot of hard things you go through to achieve, because I really want to create this garden and all the layers of colors and the sidelines where you see in between the spaces. But the hardest or my biggest dream was I want to make the Gope's dress turn. So you will see this one golden boat, it's on a big turntable. So because when I saw that garment first time, I saw this, the music box. If you open a little box and it's a little ballerina is turning. So I kind of connected this, almost my nostalgic memory, but it's also become how animating it is. So I wanted to kind of animate this, your work. So that was the I asked exhibition team, can I make it a garment turn? Can you make a big turntables? They said, no problem. They're so capable. But then to get the dress, that was the hardest. So because Gope's garments are very high demand, so many other museums want it, and that the garment was already committed to the other museum in France. So then I have to really fight with my curatorial conceptually. But I think my idea of make turn, I think the Gope liked that idea, so she fight against for the other museum to get it to us.
I'm going to go to the next question because I think Guo Pei Laoshi had already answered this one. Can I go to the next one, please? This is perfect. So Guo Pei Laoshi, what advice would you give women who are at their 30s and are still struggling with their early career problems? I have to be in fashion. It could just be general career. problem.
30，对，我知道，就是30多岁的女性啊，其实我都快60岁了，所以我觉得那个是最美好的年龄，最美好的年龄。因为20岁你还有点懵懂，你可能还不知道这个社会是什么，刚刚走入社会。其实30岁是最好的年龄，因为你在这个社会上已经又学到了一些东西，就是你已经立足于社会。但是30岁的女人会面对着好多角色，比如说你又是女儿，你可能又是妈妈，又是妻子，然后你有了自己的事业，有了热爱，那你可能在公司里还有一份非常好的一个职务。所以这样的多面，就是你要把它平衡好。其实生命不是说给予你的你全部都不要，就是当然我觉得现在的审美有一种叫极简，还有叫这个极繁，就是比如华美繁复华美，但是盛世才出华美。所有的盛世，它所有的盛世都是华美的，但是到有一些时代，比如说我们的宋代，它就是简约的，因为那个时代国弱民，就文风很强，但国家很弱，所以其实对于一个人生来讲，你也都要接受它。在我很年轻的时候，有媒体问到，如果让你选择生活和事业，你会选择什么？我20多岁的时候一回答，我就极力的说，我可能好像更爱事业。然后到我30岁的时候说，你为什么要让我选择？为什么不都让我拥有啊？所以拥有是一种能力，所以我既是一个好的女儿，我非常孝顺我的父母，然后我也是个好的妻子。我先生觉得他和我的相识对他来讲生命非常的美好，那我更是一个好的母亲，我有2个女儿，同时我是一个好的老板，员工都很爱我，我又是一个很好的设计师。那我设计产品真的是非常受欢迎，因为我会赚钱。好的设计师就是要赚到钱，你的商品有人买，你才是好的设计师。赚到钱了以后，我才能做我的艺术，所以我又是一个很好的艺术家。所以其实我在这个社会上有非常多的角色。那同样30岁的女人就面对着你应该去接受更多你在社会上的角色，所以多么兴奋的事情。然后我相信30岁如果你有了这样的态度，你60岁就会超过我。所以我觉得我将来可能还是个外婆，或者我也许有一天弄一个博物馆，也跟Nico一样做策展人，或者我也成为一个馆长。总之我相信还有很多，或者我是个老师，我觉得我特别适合当老师。总之我觉得我还有很多的社会角色等着我，所以不要怕，要接受，就像我的作品一样，内心要强大起来。我站在我的作品面前，我超级渺小，所有人都会惊讶西方的媒体没见过，说天哪，你和我们想象的不一样，因为他们想象郭培是那样的，其实郭培原来是这么小的一个女人。但是你知道吗？作品是我的内心，所以外表要柔弱一点，让别人对你没有那么多防范然后更爱你，然后你更容易得到帮助，因为你一定要得到人的帮助，对吧？多多的得到社会的帮助，得到旁边的所有人都觉得你特别的好像没有生存能力，因为我被我身边所有人的爱，然后我先生都怕我出门会丢，然后我的孩子们也关心我，然后我的客户他们在乎我，他们说你今天有吃饭吗？我出门不用给他们买机票，我不用管他们住宿。现在任何一个品牌请 VIP 来到一个什么活动都会帮他，我什么都不管，全部是他们管我，全部是我的客人管我，这是多么美好的商业。所以商业就是感谢彼此感恩的，他们感恩我为他做了一件衣服，他爱20年他都收藏，但是我也感恩他给了我钱让我能做艺术。所以我特别想在最后的时间跟大家分享，所有艺术品所用的每一分钱都是我和我团队挣的，但是我们又没有钱，因为我们的钱全部又投入到艺术中。所以我觉得人他不能够仅仅去赚钱，更重要的是会花钱，不是会赚钱。如果你赚的你自己根本就不会花的钱，其实你会让这个世界失去平衡。
I needed that. Yeah. So this next question is one that I would like to ask as well. What is your next dream design? This will take an hour. I think she has a lot of things on her
这个
mind.
因为一看到这个梦想，一看到下一个设计，我就特别兴奋，因为我已经有好几个设计都在我的工作室里一直在做，我就等待它与世界分享的那个时刻。所以呢，你提到设计，下一个设计，我接下来我在想，哎呀，我要在上海做一场秀，做最美的衣服，那些又可以穿又超越于生活，但是适度的。我其实把我的设计已经分为几个部分，一个部分纯粹的艺术表达，我不会去卖，那是我留给世界的，它就是未来的文化，未来的历史。那是一个人来到这个地球上，来到世界，生为人，要为这个世界所做一点什么。就像我说，留下一点点的传说。所以今天我想说，可能是这个问题以外的，因为我们那个时代，在我们最接受教育的时候，接受了最好的教育，就在我们小的时候。那个教育就叫为人民服务，就是你做事其实是帮助这个社会、为他人的。所以我们带着这样的认知，就是我们在最小的教育。所以我们来到一个团队，我会去想，我为团队能做什么。当我来到这个博物馆，我马上会想ECO要我做什么。所以我们全身心的去想帮助别人，结交一个朋友，我都会想我能帮朋友做些什么。但是今天很多年轻人，他们说我来到这个世界。这个世界能给我什么？来到一个团队，他会说我在这里能得到什么？交一个朋友，他会说对我有什么好处？所以我们那一代人似乎都想留下点什么，而现在很多的年轻人总想带走点什么。你带到哪里去呀？就像我作品里面有一条金船，它就是那条这个我们这一生所做的条船，你不知道从哪里上船，你不知道从哪里下船，但是最好是留下一点什么为这个世界。所以下一个作品我一定会都是发自内心的爱。我在我所有的作品中，它会激发出我想告诉所有人，包括这些年轻人啊，包括未来，我太想让我的作品用美感动人们，所以我想我的作品呢，就永远会是向美的，向美而行。
I want to be sure that those of you who are maybe a little bit shy, we welcome you to ask any questions. You can raise your hand. I have a mic here. At the same time, I want to invite all of you down after the talk to also meet Guo Pei Lao Shi. She's actually one of the nicest, approachable person that I have ever met. So I'm going to ask just one last question because she has such an amazing life. What do you do at the end of the day to relax so that you can get your creativity back up the next day?
我睡觉啊，我觉得睡觉特别重要。我今天到现在我也需要9个小时睡眠，8个小时以上。如果9个小时以下，我就会有一点累。还有一个，我想跟大家在这个最后分享一个非常重要的，是我2岁的时候，我2岁多，我外婆跟我说的，它影响了我的一生。所以你知道吗？最累的时候应该不吃东西，而不是吃东西。吃东西其实让你更消耗自己。而我7天在香港，我今天要离开，这7天我真的非常累，我从早上到晚上没有休息，中午从来不给我安排吃饭时间。ECO根本说，因为我不吃饭，我曾经跟他说，我白天是不吃饭的，但是我因为忙的早饭也没吃，所以我有时饿的都不行了。但是我小的时候，我外婆跟我说过3件事情，太有智慧了。她说第一件事情就是人来到世上，饭3样东西是带来的，第一带来的是粮食，所以呢，你吃完了你就离开这世界了。你知道那时候我才2、3岁，我特别怕死，我天哪，吃完了我就死了，我死了去哪儿啊？这就是我2岁特别怕的问题，所以我每次吃饭都会省一点。如果阿姨在幼儿园，阿姨盛粥会说你要多少1碗，不半碗，我就喝半碗。所以我在中学就开始不吃午饭了，所以我真的年龄看上去比我的同龄年轻，因为我真的少吃1顿饭。我在我15、16岁的时候，有一天我跟我妈妈说，妈妈我可以活120。我妈妈说你疯了，80年代，她说60岁都是 老人了，80岁就长寿了，那你怎么活到120？我说我还留了40年的饭呢，所以这个真的很重要。所以节省粮食，节约，也不要吃东西就适度就好，对健康有好处。第二点，财富是带来的。我外婆跟我说，钱不是挣的，所以呢，你知道为什么有人生下就有钱，有人辛苦一辈子都没有钱？不是努力挣来的，这一点你要知道。所以你不要为钱去做事，这是我外婆告诉我的。你不要为钱，你说这个事能挣到钱， no， 你要为爱去做，你要为你想做去做。所以我的人生就选择走上了我最爱的路，所以要为爱去付出，而不是为钱。我这个真的是这样，所以有很多人，你看他买彩票中了钱，然后很快就没有了，他还受穷。第三点就是你来到这个世界上，你是有使命的，就有任务的。当你任务完成了，你也就离开这个世界了。所以你也不要拼命的干活，因为你的任务要太早的做完了，你就走了。所以爱惜自己，你不要每天加班加点的去做，但是所有你做的一件事情，就像我坐这里回答问题，其实我就一定要做好。所以我每一件事情都做好，才做下一件事情。这就是我走过来的人生。我的人生都是，我一直以来我们觉得没有什么困难，因为困难都是我迈得过去的，所以我没有摔倒的都不是困难，所以克服掉的都不是困难。所以我有一个特别特别光明的心，所以我的作品也带着这种光明啊。对于我觉得跟大家分享这3点是对我人生非常有影响的。谢谢。
谢谢。And I think we have such an amazing afternoon. And I think I want to thank Guo Pei Lao Shi. I want to thank ECO. I think this has been one of the most sincere sharings I've ever had the pleasure of hosting. And I want to thank M Plus, other team, to bring this exhibition over to Hong Kong. Always world class, always inspiring. And I hope that you will continue to take Guo Pei Lao Shi's spirit and approach life in that way, because as we know, life is what you make of it. And here she is, she's making the best of her life every day. And with that, I conclude this fireside chat. And like I say, come on down, meet us, say hi to us, and get to know the legend. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you.